She said she's fine. She said she doesn't care. She said it doesn't matter, that she's moved on, that you're overthinking it. And maybe, for a moment, you believed her. But here's what behavioral psychology has quietly been documenting for decades. The human mind is extraordinarily skilled at constructing words. We choose them carefully. We edit them before they leave our mouths. We use language to manage how much of ourselves we reveal and how much we protect. But there is one thing the mind cannot fully edit. One habit. One pattern of behavior so deeply wired into human emotional architecture that it surfaces without permission, even in the most composed, guarded, emotionally disciplined person. And when it comes to women, who are often far more emotionally self-aware than they're given credit for, this habit becomes the one place where everything they're feeling escapes the walls they've so carefully built. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll never be able to watch someone's behavior the same way again. There's a foundational principle in behavioral psychology that most people never consciously apply to their relationships. It's this: emotion always finds an exit. No matter how well a person believes they've contained what they feel, no matter how convincing their words, how steady their expression, how controlled their tone, the emotional body keeps its own record. And eventually, always, that record leaks through. Psychologists call this affective leakage. It refers to the unconscious behavioral expression of emotions a person is actively trying to suppress or conceal. The feeling doesn't disappear because it isn't spoken. It simply reroutes and surfaces somewhere the person least expects. What makes this so psychologically fascinating and so relevant to how we understand human connection is that the leak is rarely dramatic. It doesn't arrive in tears or outbursts or confessions. It arrives in a habit, a small, repeated, almost invisible pattern of behavior that the person engages in automatically, not because they decided to, but because their emotional state is driving it from beneath the surface. And when you learn to recognize this habit, when you understand what it looks like, what it means, and why it happens, you gain access to an emotional truth that no amount of carefully chosen words can take back. Most people move through their entire relationships never seeing this. They listen to what's said. They react to what's performed. They miss entirely what's real. The strange part is, the habit we're about to discuss isn't hidden. It happens in plain sight. It just requires knowing what you're actually looking at. Let's go deeper. Before we break this down into its specific expressions, you need to understand the core of what this habit actually is. The habit is this: attention that returns. Not attention given once, not a glance, a gesture, a single moment of warmth, but attention that keeps coming back, unprompted, unexplained, sometimes seemingly irrational, to the same person, again and again. When a woman's feelings are genuinely engaged, when something real is happening beneath the composed exterior, her attention begins to orbit. It doesn't leave. It doesn't move on. It circles. And this circling shows up across multiple behaviors, across multiple contexts, in ways both visible and private. Each expression of it is slightly different, but they all share the same psychological root. She keeps returning. Now let's look at exactly how this manifests, because this is where it becomes impossible to dismiss. Watch what happens after a meaningful exchange between two people who share genuine emotional tension. A few hours pass, maybe a day. The conversation has technically ended. There's no practical reason to revisit it. And then she does. She brings it back up, not aggressively, not dramatically, but quietly. I've been thinking about what you said. Or she references something from earlier in a context where it didn't need to be referenced. Or she asks a follow-up question about something you discussed that has no logistical importance. This return to the conversation is not habit in the casual sense. It is evidence that the conversation never actually ended. Not for her. Psychologists studying emotional rumination and interpersonal bonding consistently find that we mentally revisit exchanges that carry emotional weight. The brain doesn't file them away cleanly. It keeps them open, processing, re-examining, extracting meaning. When she brings a conversation back to the surface, she's revealing that it lodged somewhere significant, that your words created something in her that she's still sitting with. And here's what most people miss entirely. The fact that she mentions it at all means she had to decide to. She could have kept the return private, kept the replay internal, never let you know it was happening. The moment she voices it, she's chosen to close some of the distance between what she feels and what she shows. That is never accidental. There are 15 people in the room, and somehow, in the middle of a conversation with someone else, in the middle of a laugh, in the middle of a completely unrelated moment, her eyes find you. Not because you called her name, not because you did something dramatic, simply because her attention, left to its own devices, gravitates in your direction. This is one of the most psychologically transparent expressions of the returning attention habit, and it is almost entirely involuntary. Cognitive psychology has long established that our visual attention is guided not just by what's happening in our environment, but by what's emotionally significant to us within it. We look, without deciding to look, at what matters to us. The brain prioritizes the processing of emotionally relevant stimuli and directs the eyes accordingly. In plain terms, she looks at you because her nervous system has already decided you're important. What makes this particularly revealing is the quality of the look. It's not a studied observation. It's not a deliberate check. It's a glance that arrives before she's had time to curate it. And sometimes you catch it. And in the half second before she looks away, there's a flicker of something unguarded. That unguarded flicker is the truth beneath the performance. She can control what she says. She can manage her expression when she's prepared. But she cannot fully supervise where her eyes go when she isn't thinking about supervising them. And they keep going to you. This one is subtle. So subtle that most people experience it without ever naming what it is. She notices when your mood shifts. She picks up on the slight change in your tone before you've said anything directly. She asks, sometimes casually, sometimes with more care than the question implies, "Are you okay?" At exactly the moment something shifted that she had no obvious reason to detect. This is emotional attunement, and it only develops toward people who occupy significant space in our inner world. Psychologist John Gottman's research on emotional intelligence in relationships found that people develop heightened perceptual sensitivity toward individuals they are deeply emotionally invested in. They become, essentially, attuned, able to detect micro changes in expression, voice, and energy that would be invisible to someone less invested. She has become attuned to you. She didn't decide to study you. She didn't sit down and memorize your patterns. It happened the way all deep attunement happens, gradually, involuntarily, as a byproduct of caring. The deeper reason this matters is what it reveals about where her attention lives when you're not actively interacting. She notices your shifts because part of her is always peripherally oriented toward you, always running a low-level background process that tracks your emotional temperature. You don't develop that sensitivity towards someone you're indifferent to. You develop it towards someone who matters. She pulled back. Maybe something felt too intense, too vulnerable, too close to what she wasn't ready to admit. She created space, cooled the temperature, reduced the frequency, gave herself room to breathe. And then, after the distance she herself created, she returns. A message, a small gesture, a reason to be near you again that is technically about something else, but is fundamentally about this. She couldn't stay away. This cycle, closeness, retreat, return, is one of the most psychologically significant patterns in human emotional behavior, and it is almost always misread. People who experience the retreat tend to interpret it as disinterest, as rejection, as confirmation that the feeling wasn't mutual. But behavioral psychology tells a different story. The retreat in many cases is not evidence of absence of feeling. It is evidence of its presence and its intensity. People pull back from emotional experiences that feel overwhelming. They create distance from connections that threaten to matter too much before they feel safe enough to let them. But here's what's crucial. Truly indifferent people don't need to retreat. You retreat from something that has weight. You step back from an edge that feels significant. And the return, the moment she comes back after the distance she chose, is the habit expressing itself at its most honest. Because returning required overcoming the same resistance that created the distance in the first place. She came back after everything she told herself, after all the space she carefully constructed. She came back. You mentioned something in passing weeks ago, something minor, something you said without emphasis, without any expectation that it would be retained. She remembers it, not the broad strokes, the specific detail, the exact phrasing, the context around it. She remembers it in a way that reveals she didn't just hear it, she kept it. Memory in the context of emotional relationships is not neutral. We don't store information about people we're indifferent to with any particular care. But when someone matters to us, when our emotional system has registered them as significant, our memory of them operates differently. Cognitive psychology refers to this as emotionally enhanced memory consolidation. Experiences and information associated with emotionally significant people are encoded more deeply, retained more reliably, and recalled more readily than neutral information. She's been storing you carefully. Every small thing you shared, every offhand detail, every moment that felt unremarkable to you, she has been keeping them somewhere. Not out of obsession, not out of strategy, but because when something matters to us, we hold onto it instinctively, the way you hold something fragile. When she recalls the detail you forgot, she's not showing off. She's accidentally revealing how much attention she's been paying in the quiet, private, uncommented upon way that genuine feeling moves through a person. When you're present, she may seem composed, measured, unhurried. But watch what happens when you're suddenly less available, when the frequency drops, when you pull back, even slightly, even temporarily. Something shifts. It might look like irritation. It might look like nonchalance taken a shade too far, a performance of not caring that is just slightly too deliberate to be believable. It might look like a casual, "Oh, you've been busy," delivered in a tone that contains considerably more information than those 4 words. The reaction to your absence is among the most psychologically honest data points available, because it is almost impossible to fake convincingly in the other direction. You cannot perform genuine indifference to an absence that actually affects you. The affect always shows, in the slight edge in the voice, in the over-casual body language, in the comment that arrives with just a little too much control behind it. Psychologists studying attachment behavior note that anxiety responses to perceived distance are automatic in individuals with emotional investment. The nervous system registers the absence of an emotionally important person as a mild threat and responds accordingly. She doesn't choose to react. Her emotional system reacts for her. And the size of the reaction, however carefully she tries to minimize it, reveals the size of the feeling she's managing. Here is what all of this comes down to. Words are constructed. Words are chosen, shaped, edited, sometimes deployed specifically to obscure what's true. We are all, to some extent, the authors of our own emotional narrative, deciding what to share, what to withhold, what to protect. But behavior operates beneath the authorship. The habit of returning attention, in conversation, in a crowded room, in memory, across distance, this habit does not wait for permission. It does not consult the part of a person that wants to seem composed. It simply surfaces, again and again, drawn by the emotional gravity of someone who matters. You don't have to be told how someone feels. You only have to learn how to watch. Because the most honest thing about a person is never what they say in their most guarded moments. It's what they keep doing, quietly, repeatedly, almost invisibly, when they think the feeling isn't showing. The feelings always show. If something in this video made you see a connection differently, or made you think of someone specific, that reaction is worth sitting with. Drop it in the comments. And if you want to go further into the unspoken psychology of human emotion and connection, the next video is already there.